Mr. Chancellor, distinguished guests, graduating class of 2012, and your friends and families, I'd like to introduce my friend Ron Rosenes to you. Not all that long ago, when you're my age, in the spring of 1969, Ron sat where you are sitting now. He graduated with an honors BA in French and Russian from Carleton. He went on to study on exchange in Russia, and he completed an MA in Slavic languages in Toronto, where they also have a university. He then embarked on his career, starting as a teacher in a cégep in Montreal, and then started his own national sales company. In 1987, he was formally diagnosed with HIV/AIDS. Ron knew that he had been infected several years earlier, and that means that he's been living with HIV for more than 30 years now. And soon after he was diagnosed, his career path changed dramatically. Ron confronted HIV/AIDS directly, and he quickly became an advocate for access to treatment and informed health policies to deal with what was then a new virus. His abilities to communicate his ideas and to mediate between the communities of those infected with HIV on the one hand and political power on the other made him a leading advocate for the rights of people living with HIV/AIDS, not only in Toronto, not only in Canada, but throughout the world. And I think it's important to bear in mind that many people who live with AIDS live on the margins of our own society and outside the affluent centers of global society. Ron's distinction was to channel the needs of the many who have no voice and who would otherwise face insurmountable barriers to care. I don't have time now to list all Ron's works, his writings, and other accomplishments in detail. They involve local activism with AIDS Action Now, chairing the AIDS Committee for several years, the AIDS Committee of Toronto for several years in the 1990s, and being a founding member of the board of the Sherbourne Health Centre in Toronto. More broadly within Canada, Ron sits on the Ontario Advisory Committee on HIV/AIDS, which advises the Ontario Minister of Health, and the Scientific Review Committee of the Ontario HIV Network. He also sits on advisory committees at the Natural Health Products Directorate at Health Canada, the Canadian Trials Network, and the Canadian Institute of Health Research. And Ron's work extends to international engagement. He was vice chair of the board of the 16th International AIDS Conference held in Toronto in 2006, and he's been deeply involved in other international conferences in locations as diverse as Sydney, Mexico City, Vienna, and Durban. Using his expertise in Russian, he participated in the Canada AIDS Russia project, which established clinics in St. Petersburg and other parts of Russia. Ron has received many awards for his work, including a Queen's Golden Jubilee Medal in 2002, but I know that this recognition from Carleton University is especially meaningful to him. Therefore, Mr. Chancellor, in recognition of his passionate advocacy for the rights of people all over the world living with HIV/AIDS, I request that you confer the degree of Doctor of Laws honoris causa upon Ron Rosenes.
By virtue of my authority, I confer upon you this degree of Doctor of Laws honoris causa.
Mr. Chancellor, Charles Chi, Madam Board Chair and members of the Board of Governors, Madam President and Vice Chancellor Dr. Runta, Dr. Harper, members of faculty, graduates of the Faculty of Public Affairs, families and friends of the graduates. It reminds me as well today of the Queen's Diamond Jubilee, except with better weather. I'd like to begin my remarks, though, by thanking the friends and family who are here to celebrate this wonderful honor with me today. Your love and your support have nourished me in times of need and given me strength to do the work that I do and which I do as part of a vast collective. Of course, I wish my parents were still here and were able to be with me today. I can hear my mother now. She would finally be able to say the words, "My son, the doctor." This day, though, it comes as I stand on the cusp of the age of senior majority, a proud member of the first wave of baby boomers. We, who are about to overwhelm all of the social programs of our great country, salute you. But with that in mind, I'm planning to work for the foreseeable future. I don't plan to be taking work away from any of you, so don't worry. But retirement, I've decided, is for wimps. Plus, I can't afford it because I didn't expect to live this long. So let this be the first of the takeaways on this beautiful day when you are here at what is supposed to be for you the end of the beginning, and I am here on the day which is supposed to be for me the beginning of the end. Carleton, I'm proud to say, is my alma mater. Carleton gave me an incredible leg up with which to begin my adult life, but it did prepare me in ways I could never have anticipated when I was here studying Russian and French for 4 years from 1965. I have very fond memories of my Russian professors, George Melnikov, Paul Varnay, and John Lloyd, and the patient and forbearing Emily Stichling. My French professors included Jean-Paul Barry, with whom I taught at Vanier College Cégep through the 1970s and who became a dear friend. We lost Jean-Paul in June of last year. And then there is the redoutable Madeleine Gobet, who instilled in me a love of French theater and for whom I acted in many plays while a student. Madeleine, who taught me the nuances of the verb baiser, both in European French and in Québécois. You can ask me about that later. Madeleine, who convinced my parents to let me go on my first trip to Europe at age 19. Madeleine, who has been my dear friend for over 45 years. I hope that those of you who are graduating today will be able to recall with similar affection the professors who inspired you. But beyond the useful skill of acquiring fluency in French and Russian, exposure to the ideas of their great writers helped to form my commitment to principles of social justice, and these principles came to play an important role in what happened next. Like so many gay men in the early 1980s, I contracted HIV, the human immunodeficiency virus, and while my test came as no surprise to me, I did struggle to see the road ahead with much clarity. By the early 1990s, I was advised to stop working, to slow down. Slow down to live is what the counselor at the AIDS Committee of Toronto told me at the time, and it was a difficult time indeed. We lost thousands of friends to this disease. I lost my cousin, Andrew Shapiro, my partner, Kimball Hall, and the artist John Lander, to name a very few, but it's important to me to say their names out loud here today amongst friends and family who are here today. In the early 1980s, the AIDS movement was storming and forming. We demanded that our governments pay attention to a virus that was killing people whom society largely disavowed. We demanded that the pharmaceutical industry discover antiretroviral therapies and bring them to market as safely and quickly as time would allow. We fought for our lives. Many were saved, or at the very least, given a reprieve. It's true, HIV changed my life, but I believe my life has changed HIV and the way people think about it today. And if not, I hope to in the next few minutes. For reasons, thank you, for reasons that are very puzzling and difficult for me to understand, I'm here today as a survivor, as a witness, and as a pioneer. I'm a survivor, I guess, because when you live as long as I have with this virus, that makes you one, despite not having a cure, but we're working on that too. I'm a witness. I've been a witness to the incalculable loss of friends, but also a witness to amazing scientific advances. And I'm a pioneer as a member of the first cohort aging with HIV and bringing with it a whole new set of unanticipated challenges. You know, as people with HIV, we really were the new kids on the block some 30 years ago, and we quickly learned to demand our place at the healthcare table. People living with HIV have always been at the heart of the AIDS movement because we had to be, together with the many friends and allies who supported us along the way. We are the disease group that defined patient involvement. The concept of patient involvement and the and the fact that it means involvement in all of the decisions that affect our lives. Or nothing about us without us, as one of my favorite slogans goes. And I think we've had a profound effect on other diseases as well, such as cancer and MS, in pressing for equity and access in the healthcare system that we value as Canadians. But you know, we had no choice. We had no choice due to the degree of stigma and discrimination which to this day attach themselves so insidiously to a disease that is transmitted through unprotected sex or contaminated needles, a disease we still can't cure, but we certainly know how to prevent. I became an activist and an advocate for the rights of people living with HIV. During my 14-year tenure on the board of the Canadian Treatment Action Council, together with the indomitable Louise Binder, we built a national organization run by and for people living with HIV. Our mission? To ensure access to care and treatment across Canada. And while today HIV is no longer a disease of gay men, that's not to say that HIV does not discriminate. Today, most people at risk of acquiring or transmitting HIV are often living in poverty. They may be without adequate shelter. They may be street involved or have a history of incarceration. They may suffer from addictions or mental health. They are increasingly young, they are increasingly women and young men. And far too often, they come from our First Nations communities where there's been a long history of trauma from, among other things, the shameful past of residential schools. It should come as no surprise why the most disadvantaged in our society are also the most likely to come into contact with HIV. In fact, for many people who contract HIV today, the virus may be the least of their concerns. Finding shelter, the next meal, or the next fix may all take precedence over getting to the doctor and taking medications on time. And yet, we risk being taught, and we keep hearing, it's the virus, stupid. This urge towards a simplistic and reductionist way of thinking and problem solving serves us poorly. We will never solve the challenges of HIV until we understand it in all of its social, economic, and cultural dimensions. It's about power, who has it and who does not. HIV continues to raise important issues of human rights. It's time for us to stop criminalizing Canadians who are addicted to illicit drugs or suffer from mental health issues. People need to be in treatment. They don't need to be in bigger and more expensive prisons. It's also time to curtail the expanding use of the criminal justice system to punish people for their failure to disclose their HIV status, except in the most serious cases. We will only solve the challenges of HIV and improve health for Canadians if we tackle the greater challenge of reducing social and economic inequality, as well as the challenge of confronting and demystifying cultural taboos. Your takeaway is to remember that complex problems require complex solutions. When HIV spread beyond gay men to reach into other marginalized groups, we realized that our true mission at the Canadian Treatment Action Council lay not just in using a position of privilege to speak on behalf of those who are traditionally without voice, but to give people the tools they need to speak and be heard in their own voice, in the authentic voice of their own lived experience. I'm fortunate to have attended the recent international AIDS conferences in my role as community activist liaison, as the person living with HIV who's there to encourage and support community activism at these bustling annual meetings which are held all over the world. And it's really enabled me to work with people in community groups in Russia and in countries of la francophonie to build the strength and capacity of these individuals to advocate for their rights and for those of the people that they serve in their communities. And I get to use the languages that I studied at Carleton in ways that I never could have anticipated. I use them as an agent of social change. So as you develop your skills and your knowledge, remember, they are not just for the betterment of your own life. They can and should be put to use for the betterment of all. It can be a challenge to hang on to your ideals, but without ideals and without hope and a plan to achieve them, we are nothing. Angels in America is a play about the AIDS epidemic by the American playwright Tony Kushner that debuted in 1988 at the height of the epidemic. And the main character, Prior Walter, is sure that AIDS will take his life, despite the news that the first AIDS drug, AZT, has just been developed. He's bargaining with the angel who appears before him and visits him in hallucinations at difficult moments. And he says, but still bless me anyway. I want more life. I can't help myself. I do. I've lived through such terrible times, and there are people who live through much worse. But you see them living anyway, when they're more spirit than body, more sores than skin, when they're burned and in agony, when flies lay eggs in the corners of their eyes of their children, they live. Death usually has to take life away. I don't know if that's just the animal. I don't know if it's not braver to die, but I recognize the habit. I recognize the addiction to being alive. So we live past hope. If I can find hope anywhere, that's it. That's the best I can do. It's so much not enough. It's so inadequate, but bless me anyway. I want more life. At the end of the play, Prior Walter is still alive, and it looks like he may get to the day when better therapies would make HIV a more chronic and manageable disease. In other words, he gets what we all want, more life, and the opportunities and the challenges and the rewards that can, with luck and hard work, come with it. And so I wish all of you in your future endeavors much success. And thank you again to Carleton University for this magnificent honor and the friends who recommended me for this honorary degree. I can't wait to add it to my resume. There is so much I still want to do and so much work that needs to be done. Thank you.